From Social Prosperity Partners, this is Community Catalysts. Welcome to Community Catalysts, the podcast that examines the qualities of community leadership and the many paths and forms it can take. I'm Matt Lehrman. Our guest today is Rudy Mendoza, the Chief of Police of the city of Tolleson, Arizona, a community of less than 6 square miles on the outskirts of Phoenix with a population of just over 7,000 residents. He's accepted our invitation to get up close and personal about his journey to leadership so that we all might learn from his experience. Welcome, Chief Rudy Mendoza.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So since we're going to get up close and personal, may I call you Rudy?
Absolutely.
All right. So Rudy, you've been serving in law enforcement in Tolleson, I believe, for over 20 years. In preparing for this conversation, we asked you to share a defining moment from your leadership journey, and you wrote about a high school teacher who encouraged you to put yourself forward and run for president of a new student club. And I'm really wondering, what do you imagine your teacher specifically saw in you that made her think that you possessed leadership qualities? Like back in the day, what was that she saw?
You know, it's funny. This has happened to me on different occasions. First of all, I hate talking about myself. I'm just not a guy that likes to be boastful or pat myself on the back. But, you know, I think people have always told me that I have this kind of natural charisma, this ability to kind of connect with people. I've been called informal leader, I don't know how many times as I was going through the ranks of the police department and in high school and on different teams that I was part of. I think Miss Shipley, I think she just saw that. I think she just saw, here's Rudy Mendoza. When he says things, people are kind of listening to what he has to say, you know, and either the ship's going to rise with him or the ship's going to sink with him. And so maybe I try to get my arm around him and get him to kind of lead us in the right direction. And
does that mean charismatic, like, you know, not just social, but that you had a way of getting other people to work with you, that you were kind of naturally collaborative? Is that what that means?
I think so. I just love being part of the team. I've always loved being part of the team. I love team dynamics. I love team sport. In this new class, it was called MESA. It's Math, Engineering, Science Achievement. And it was a new class that was starting at Peoria. I kind of jumped into that class. It was for minority students to get into this class and kind of build those skills because, you know, someone did some evaluation where they said, hey, minority kids are struggling in math and engineering and science, and see what we can do to build them up in these areas. So I jumped into this class and I was surrounded with people who were like me and wanted to kind of move forward with their lives and get on with their journey. And we were just a team. And so when we had this club and no one wanted to be the person to do it, and they just came to me.
Rudy, it was such a pivotal experience for you. I'm wondering, has it made you especially mindful of your ability to pay that encouragement forward during the course of your career? And how have you done that?
100%. I have so many stories, Matt, of people coming into my life exactly in the moments that I needed them, either say something, just basically encourage me to, you know, move in a positive direction and to kind of change the course of my life. I'm really big in trying to identify who's going to sit in my seat next and try to, you know, build them into doing that, help them kind of reach their goals.
You said that you're already thinking about who's going to succeed you in your position. And I'm just imagining there are a lot of leaders who are consumed with how they get themselves to the top. Are you saying that a part of your leadership philosophy is also thinking about who's going to follow you?
Absolutely. And I want them to be better than me, you know, and I know they will be because I'm going to put in some time and the energy. And I know the rest of my staff put in the time and energy into preparing them better than I was prepared. And I think that would be a significant jump from when I'm chief. I think they'll look back and hopefully I'll just keep moving down the scale and the bar will just keep going higher and higher. But absolutely, I'm looking for the next person. I'm not going to be here forever. And I think you just have those conversations and you tell them like, hey, just like what Miss Shipley did to me, like, hey, I can see you doing this, but you have to start right now. And these are the decisions you have to make. And this is where I see some things where you can get better and get stronger that you're going to need when you get up here. One of the people I identified, I mean, he's just a tremendous leader. He's a heck of a worker. He's very hard working, and a lot of people gravitate to him. And I can see it. But kind of where he struggles is having those tough conversations when you get up to this point and you have to let people go. You have to, discipline people, and you have to have conversations where you have to tell people that, they're not going to get the position that they want. There's these tough conversations and he struggles in those moments. And so now I have to, bring him along, and I've had him in the room with me when I'm having these conversations with employees. And so he can see how I handle them, and then maybe he can frame a way that he'll be able to do it moving forward in the future.
That's two things going on there. That's mentorship, where you actually show someone how it's done, but it's also about showing people that you have confidence in them and kind of helping nurture whatever spark or interest they might have, even if they didn't have the vision for themselves.
Right. I think, when I made chief, someone came into my office and said, hey, a long time ago when we were having a discussion out on the road, you said, I asked you if you ever wanted to be chief, and you said no. And I said, well, yeah, I was 24, 25 years old at the time. I was in patrol and I was loving the job. Of course I didn't want to be chief. Like I had no idea that this would be a potential landing spot for me. I was just kind of consumed with the job and loving the job and everything about the job. So it's kind of, now I see that in these officers that are coming through Tolleson PD, and I see them and they're in the job and they're focused with that. And it's like, hey, I want you to have fun doing the job. I want you to be good at what you're doing, but I also want you to keep one eye on how do I get better and go up to the next level and keep moving up.
Rudy, as a leader, how do you feel if, as those people are moving up, they're moving up, but they're moving out of your department, they're going somewhere else? Is there a disappointment if that happens?
I think early on in my career when people left, I was definitely disappointed. And I think there was parts of me that felt like they were going against everything that they had told me about being here in Tolleson. And then I went to Northwestern, which is like a leadership school put on by Northwestern University. And there was a small town chief that came in, and he kind of opened my eyes to a new way of looking at this. And I think it's a better way of looking at it. And it's now how I look at it is that I want people that want to be here in Tolleson, because people that want to be here in Tolleson are going to give me their best. The people that don't want to be here in Tolleson that are working here, I'll never get their best. But police agencies across the United States need good people. They need good men and women to do this job. And so it really doesn't matter if they're wearing my patch, or if they're wearing some other agency's patch. I know they're a good person and I want them to be successful. Then I got to let them go be successful somewhere else. And they're doing me a favor because they're going to be hardworking at that agency, and they're going to be making police departments look better across the country. And I can't fault them for that.
So I want to ask you now about one of the specific initiatives in your police department. I want you to tell me more about starting a wellness program for the Tolleson Police Department. Why was that a priority for you, and what did it entail to actually create that?
I thought a lot about where this kind of came from. And so to do that, I kind of want to take you back to 2001 when I was going into the police academy. It was April 2nd, 2001. I'm at the police academy here in Phoenix. And I'm just grinning ear to ear. I'm just happy to be here. And, you go in and, they do all the yelling, and then you get into kind of classwork stuff. And I remember it was my Sergeant Smart. He comes up to the front of the class and he's kind of telling us about police work and kind of what we're signing up for. One of the things he said is like, hey, yeah, you'll be able to retire in 20 years, but look around. Everybody look around at the class. And so you're looking around at other students. As you're looking around at the other students, he says, the statistic is that most of you will die within 5 to 7 years after your retirement. So you work hard for this 20-year retirement, but you probably won't see more than 5 years of it. That's kind of what you're signing up for. I think that's the truth, but I also think that the way that generation of officer and leaders in law enforcement handled it was to kind of just bury that. Like, yeah, that's something that these guys have to deal with 20 years down the road.
Rudy, I'm sorry. I need to make sure I understand. The sergeant was saying that after a 20-year career in law enforcement, that retirees would die in 5 to 7 years, the cause of which was what? The accumulated stress of the work?
100%. The stress from work, heart disease, just bad health, just kind of wear and tear of the job. This actually played out in June of 2023. My best friend, who retired here from Tolleson Police Department, passed away of a heart attack less than 5 years after retirement.
At what age?
He was 54 years old.
Oh, wow.
So we know this exists. We know it's happening. But really there's just kind of this acceptance of this is what is the reality. And then everybody just kind of has to deal with it on their own when they get to that retirement age. And lucky for me in 2018, I got to go to the FBI National Academy, and less than 1% of law enforcement get to do that. And I was blessed to be able to go down to Quantico, Virginia for 10 weeks, go back to the right person in my life in the right moment. I got to take a wellness class there. It's actually kind of one of the last master's level classes that was there that nobody was signing up for. So I ended up at the time thinking I was getting stuck with this class, but they talked a lot about, hey, we have an obligation as leaders to do something for our people, to manage them past that 5 to 7 years. Like if they're working so hard for this retirement, and it's a grueling job and it's difficult. We had a 14-year-old female that just died, teenager that just died in a traffic accident this past weekend. And my officers were first on scene performing life-saving measures to kind of keep her going. That stuff sticks with you and it stays there. And so what we usually tend to do is kind of bury it. But again, we as leaders, we have this obligation to help them work past that so that they're not struggling and kind of holding on to this. And because when I was testing to be the chief, that was one of my things I told the panel was my goal is to make sure that everybody gets to that retirement age as close to intact as possible, because I want to see them progress 10, 15, 25 years past retirement. Because they've earned it. I feel like they've earned it. And I feel like I'm obligated to provide some type of wellness program.
So what was the process like to create the wellness program? Were there challenges? Was there resistance out of the law enforcement community, or are there cultural barriers to putting wellness into place?
So the whole topic of wellness in law enforcement kind of exploded. And so there's so many options. It now when I go to the IACP conference, International Association of Chiefs of Police conference. There's so many wellness booths, and there's this retreat place, and there's meditation centers, and there's the physical wellness programs and that type of stuff. And so we kind of trying to figure that out, even at this point, kind of what our wellness program is going to look like. There's various kind of directions that we're hitting with. None of it obviously is mandatory, which is, I don't think that is that great. I wish I could make this mandatory because kind of our biggest obstacle in any wellness program for any police department is the stigma attached to doing any of the things that the wellness program will provide.
Let me make sure I understand. You can't make the wellness program mandatory?
I guess I can, but then you wonder what anybody's going to get out of it. For instance, if I can mandate everybody go to therapy, even just for a one-time visit, even when I started just having that discussion, the amount of pushback that I got from people, just kind of their fears that, we have a fitness for duty law here in Arizona. It rarely gets used. But I think in the back of people's minds are what's Rudy going to do with this information when he finds out that I'm struggling with this event? What is Rudy going to do if the chief, what is he going to do if he finds out that I have this going on or have that going on? And trying to get people past that point is really been a struggle.
So I want to ask you about therapy, but I really want to make sure I understand the scope of what a wellness program is. Are there kind of, some key points we should know about what a wellness program is overall?
What I envision our wellness program being is our city allows for us to have one physical for free every year. If I was going to guess, maybe 15%, maybe 10% of our officers are actually going and taking their annual physical, something that might identify, diabetes, heart disease, cancers, all this stuff. Like it's right there for them for free and they don't take it. So I would like to see everybody annually just going and having that visit. I don't need to know the results. You should have the results, and then you make your decisions with your doctor on what to do. The second part of it is like the mental health component of it. And this is where I see, therapy visits, having kind of like an on-call therapist to kind of work through these types of calls, these tough calls that they're going on to. And it doesn't even have to be calls. This could be stuff that's happening at home, but because you have to answer that bell and come to work, that you're not able to deal with it. And so you bring that luggage to work with you. And now you're making decisions, carrying all this baggage with you. It's just not going to be happy interactions when you're at work, when you're interacting with the public, the people who are providing the service to you. And I think one that doesn't get talked a lot in wellness, though, but I think is very crucial is, financial wellness. I think a lot of people, a lot of officers, they work in hours and hours and hours of off duty, and they're not getting enough rest, and they're not sleeping enough, which is part of that physical part, the working out and the sleeping. And it's to make more money, and it's to buy toys, and they kind of live outside of their regular paycheck. And so then now they're a slave to kind of all of these other outside jobs and outside employment to kind of keep their lifestyle going. And I think we have to rein it back in and kind of have these conversations like, hey, financial wellness is a part of this wellness program. Like, every new officer, when I have an orientation, I'm like, hey, start putting money away right now. You think 25 years is, because the new retirement is 25 years. You think 25 years is so far away. But if you just start putting away money right now, day one, when you get to that 25, you'll have this kind of large chunk of money. But that's part of this program also, is kind of having those financial conversations also.
You told me that therapy was really important for you. Can I ask you, how has therapy made you a better leader?
It was someone finally turning the mirror back at me and saying to kind of just take a look at myself. If I could go back and talk to young Rudy, I wish I could put my arm around young Rudy and say, get into therapy right now, like this second. Because again, everybody's life, something is going on. People have all of these, they're carrying around all this trauma, and they're carrying around all these different things that they're not able to work through, things that are stressing them, even if you just need it for a short time. And I have been able to share that with other people. And I guess for the first time in front of people here at the police department, actually showing some vulnerability actually helped them with starting their journey and going, seeing counselors and therapists. Yeah, I'm super happy with it.
I don't want to get too personal, but can you give us an example of some specific behavior or thought process that the therapy helped you change, and what result it had for you?
I was the card-carrying club president of the Grudge Holders Association, probably first and foremost. I thought it was a badge of honor to say, hey, this person crossed me, and now I'm just going to write them off. And I'm going to always remember that grudge. And I could keep that grudge going, Matt, for years. And one thing, Dr. told me, she said, hey, Rudy, you realize what a grudge is, right? And I'm like, no, what a grudge is what? She said, it's drinking poison hoping the other person dies. She said, when that person that you're holding a grudge walks into the room, do you feel that negative energy building up? And I said, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. She's like, yeah, it's cortisol.
That's a great answer. When you think about the leaders that you're cultivating, the people who will succeed you in your position or serve other communities, do you think that your level of trust in them or your confidence in them is influenced by, maybe not specifically whether they go to therapy, but at least their openness and their ability to be aware of who they are and the things that affect them and how they navigate themselves through your community and through your department?
I would hope that it would be someone that would understand the potential of therapy or how therapy can help our organization. But really, it seems like the pattern of people that I can see moving up here in Tolleson and working up the ranks, the people that are developing are the people that are kind of people oriented, or the ones that put others first. When I see our officers, the ones that just kind of take that to the next level, and they're just always on top of that and understanding that, hey, I'm here to serve these people. I'm here to serve the citizens of Tolleson. I'm here to do this job well for them.
What's the obstacle just to making it mandatory that everyone have an annual physical and just a doctor's note that says they've had their annual physical and that's it?
It's just this weird cultural barrier. Again, it goes back to the stigma. We were kind of moving into that direction here, but then we kind of met some other obstacles with our, employee resources saying like, that's not how everybody else is doing it here in the city. So we're not really sure how we can enforce that. And then, attorneys get involved and it just, it's this weird barrier.
You're not in total control of your department. You're part of a city, and the city has to be the same with all of its employees to some extent. There's some real barriers there.
Absolutely. If we could get...
But the cultural barrier is really interesting to me because there is, I presume, I only know this from watching, cop TV shows, but, there's a toughness, there's a invincibility, there's a strength that's expected of a police officer. And I imagine that's a cultural barrier to getting people to not just talk to their doctors, but especially to pursue mental health.
Yeah. And that's definitely tough to overcome. Two stories real quick I'll share with you. We had an officer who was, unbeknownst to me and beknownst to his teammates and friends on the department, was, struggling with some depression. And really, really great on his part to realize that he was going through a difficult time and he needed some help. And so he actually on his own took 2 weeks of vacation and proceeded to get help, and then came back to work. This is, I want to say it's around 2017. So he starts to talk about it and talk about his experience and talk about his struggles, and talking about how at one point he was so depressed and when he realized he wanted to get help that he was, suicidal. But now we're kind of months removed from him going through that and going through getting some help and coming back to work. And he starts to talk about it. And the chief prior to me brings me in and says, "Hey, did you hear all this stuff that, this officer's talking about?" And I said, I have heard it. I'm glad he got the help he needed. He said, "Nope, we need to send him for fitness for duty." And I shut the door. I remember talking to my chief and saying, "Do you realize what you're going to do? You're really going to set us back. People are not going to reach out to us when they need help. They're going to be fearful of us because they're going to look at, hey, I went and got help. And now the department's trying to figure out whether I can do this job or not." Now, there are absolutely times where people need to be checked for fitness for duty. This was not one of them. And so now that he has to go back through this fitness for duty, his messaging to everybody else is, hey, if you're struggling with something, don't say anything and don't tell anybody. Because when the higher ups hear about this, they're going to make sure that you're able to do your job and maybe take your badge and your gun if you're not able to. So I really feel like that was an incident where we just absolutely got it wrong. I wasn't the sole decision maker in that, or didn't have the ability to change the decision on that. I just kind of had to execute that, which is one of my regrets. But that's kind of what we have to face. I brought in one of my employees and who was having a lot of problems or was not showing up for work or wasn't like him. I brought him in and had this discussion, having a lot of issues going on at home, trying to figure this all out by himself, it seemed like. And I said, "Have you ever thought about going to therapy?" And he said, "Yeah, but, and I said, "Well, I've had issues at home also, and I started to see a therapist, and I've gone and started talking to a therapist, and it's done wonders for me." And I just remember him having this kind of pause and look at me, and there was just kind of this quietness, and then he was like, "You go to a therapist?" And I said, "Absolutely. It's really, really has helped me out a lot." And so we talked about it a little bit, and then a conversation ended, and we kind of went on dinner or a few things. About a month and a half later, I'm pulling in the parking lot. And he says, "Hey, Chief," and he flashes the number 4. And when you flash the number 4 with your fingers to another officer, it means you're code 4, it means you're good. So that's what I assumed that he was telling me, was that he was good. And I said, "Oh, that's awesome." And he said, "No, 4." And I said, "For what?" He goes, that's how many visits I've gone to a therapist. I'm on my 4th visit." And I thought, man, this is what I needed to hear to start my day. That's great news. And I was happy for him, and I was happy that he found someone that he connected with. And I was happy that he was moving in the right direction. About a year after that, we were in a training, and he came up to me and he said, "Chief, I'm not just saying this because you're the chief, but you saved my marriage." And I said, what do you mean?" He said, "My wife and I are seeing this therapist together now, and everything's going well, and it's just changed our life. I can't thank you enough." And I said, "Well, it really isn't me. I just, I kind of threw the suggestion out there, and I just wanted to tell you how it's worked for me. And then you had to do the work, and you had to do everything." And so, but I think these are the type of breakthroughs we can have if we could get more officers into therapy. I think they could see that there's a place to drop off a lot of these things that they're carrying on a daily basis: the bad calls, the bad interactions, the tough decisions at work, the home life stuff, the money management stress stuff. This is a place that they can kind of unload that backpack so that they can have more space to kind of move on throughout their day.
Yeah, it also explains something else that I didn't understand earlier in our conversation. The reason that wellness or mental health can't be imposed from the top down is because imposing it kind of builds in, if not a resistance, a resentment, where in your second example, you were asking someone to join you in a place of vulnerability. And so you were inviting them, again, you were using your charisma, right? Your natural charisma to say, join me. Leadership is about joining me in this, not about me telling you what to do.
Right. And so new employees, when we bring them in, we have a new employee orientation, and I talk to them about the Tolleson Police Department. This is who we are. This is how we handle things. And when I get to the wellness portion and I talk to them about keeping these things in mind, I close out that slide with, find a therapist. And I tell them, now I'm the chief of police standing in front of the person who hasn't even gone to the academy yet. And I tell them, I have a therapist. It has helped me a lot. I wish I had started sooner. And then we start to see these new recruits, have one that's in the academy already with a therapist working through things. And I love that. And I want to see that continue to happen.
So you had told me that you took a lot of inspiration from listening to an audiobook called Extreme Ownership: How U.S. Navy SEALs Lead and Win. So, of course, I had to go and look up the book, and I saw a quote from it. I'm kind of picking this at random and throwing it at you. But a quote that says, "The best leaders are not driven by ego or personal agendas. They are simply focused on the mission and how best to accomplish it." Now, I can understand how that applies if you're leading an organization with a clear focus like a police department. But Rudy, I'm wondering if you could help me spin this, because the people listening to this conversation are also leaders of school boards and city councils and nonprofit organizations. When you think about how you apply this leadership skill at a community scale, what's the mission that's supposed to unite an entire community?
I think as far as like a community perspective, and I guess from my point of view, is that to understand that I am just one piece of the puzzle here for the city of Tolleson, for like the organization. And so what I need to focus on is what I have to do as my one piece in this kind of big wheel of service that we're providing to the city, and that, I guess, one of the spokes is even the community themselves, right? But make sure that I'm holding up my end, make sure that I'm doing the things that the police department can handle, and helping the fire department with what their spoke in the wheel is, and kind of making sure that they're getting through those things. So, and everybody else, I have to realize that on the community level, like, I can't solve every issue, but I can contribute what the police department can do within that issue, if that makes sense. So I can just focus on that one piece. So my mission is kind of public safety, not kind of, it is public safety, and it does branch out every once in a while, but primarily that. And so community wise, that's my contribution, and making sure that we're kind of vigilant in that mission for that piece.
I love your approach to leadership is to do the best with your particular piece of it, but not assume that leadership means that you own the whole thing entirely.
No, and sometimes as a police chief, you kind of feel that way, that everybody kind of looks to you. You know, it's like you're like the go-to. Hey, there's weeds growing in this field over here. Call the police chief, and maybe he'll figure it out. But really, it's letting people know, and hey, we're just this one piece, and we'll help out with this. We'll give you some ideas for your end, but you definitely have the expertise in that field to make those decisions, and we'll support you however we can do it within our piece to get you to move it on. But we're just one piece.
Rudy, finally, I want to tap into your training and your experience in law enforcement. In my work, I hear a lot from community leaders who are on the receiving ends of all sorts of anger and negativity. And as you would imagine, sometimes it's hard for them not to take it personally. So as a leader, how do you pick up on signs that someone might be struggling mentally? And how do you approach them in a way that's genuinely helpful and positive?
I think part of being a good leader is always adding to your toolbox as many tools that you can for different situations, and specifically for people. I know there's people that I can bring into my office and close the door and just be very stern and to the point. Hey, I see this happening. What's going on? And talk to me, and we'll get somewhere that way. And then there's other people that you cry with. There's other people that you have softer conversations with. There's other people where you don't even talk about what they're going through. You become vulnerable yourself and say, hey, you know what? I remember when I had this same attitude and I was carrying around in a similar fashion. This is what I had going on. And I realized that it was contributing to poor work performance, poor attitude at work, poor service delivery. And then that gets them to open up. But I've always told people, if you have a bad day, everybody has a bad day. I have a bad day. Everybody's going to have a bad day. When that becomes bad days, and that's when I think someone has to have some type of intervention and has to come in and have a conversation with someone. Hey, what's going on? And check in. Yeah. And they may tell you nothing's happening. They may tell you that they're okay. But you don't just stop, then you just keep going on and you try the new approach and you keep moving it forward until you figure out how you can help them get through whatever they're going through.
Chief Rudy Mendoza, thank you for your candor. Thank you for being so generous and sharing your journey to leadership. It's really inspiring. Thanks so much.
No, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thanks again to Chief Rudy Mendoza of the Tolleson Police Department. For this episode, I owe a special thanks to producer Kerry Lengel. Thanks also to our editor, Nick Living the Dream Tantillo, production assistant Jenna Maisel, and as always, our executive producer, John Little. I'm Matt Lehrman of Social Prosperity Partners. If you have a question, comment, or a story to share, reach me at 602-688-2724 or Matt with 2 T's, matt@socialprosperity.us. I'd love to hear from you. That wraps up today's discussion. Until next time, remember, everyone's journey to leadership is unique, so stay focused on being a catalyst for betterment in your community.